Welcome back to Movies TV Man. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Man. And welcome to Sunday's edition of the DCEU Daily. And hello. Listen, lots of people who create YouTube platforms can create a whole new personality for themselves. They can pretend to be someone that they're not. They can constantly create hot takes and they can become someone extremely successful. I cannot do that. I can only be myself and speak my truth. Whether that's successful or not, it doesn't matter. I can only be me. So here goes. First of all, let's talk about the Snyderverse versus the hamadaverse. Let's check the chat first. Villager. Wow, Villager is back. Where have you been? Snyderverse is dead as long as I can watch it on my Blu-rays and 4Ks, my friend. It's not dead. And considering you don't have any authority at Warner Brothers Pictures or Warner Brothers Discovery, you can't say that with any intelligence. Rewind the times. Hi, I'm Mick. So let's talk about the Snyderverse versus the hamadaverse. And these are my facts, and this is how I see it. It doesn't really matter if you like the Snyderverse. It doesn't really matter, as Villager says, if it's dead. Villager, you don't know, maybe I work at WB, but you don't. So, as Villager is clearly a Snyderverse hater and would rather, put his face in acid than get more Snyderverse. And that's okay. That's okay, Villager. You're biased against the Snyderverse and you don't want it to come back. That's okay. But here's the point I'm making. And look, even if you're like Villager and you hate the Snyderverse, you can't deny this, that the Snyderverse has a plan and it has identity. And it has a fandom. Whether you like that fandom or not, they're there. It has a brand identity and it has brand loyalty for its fandom. And again, it doesn't matter if you like them or not. The hamadaverse is a bastardized version of the Snyderverse. The hamadaverse is trying to make it palatable for a mainstream audience. And guess what? It's failed on every attempt. It doesn't have any branding. It doesn't have brand loyalty. It doesn't have a fandom as passionate as the Snyderverse. It's just a bunch of bastardized movies, and a couple of times they got lucky. They got lucky with Aquaman because Aquaman was being done even before Hamada came in anyway. It was Zack Snyder who cast those people in that film, right? And in fact, the Aquaman movie was going to be even better under Snyder because he was going to have Batman and Superman cameo in that movie and have context of the Justice League movie before it. And considering the Justice League movie was the previous movie before Aquaman in a kind of, a shared continued universe, that's what you do. Snyder's movies were very continued. So you had Man of Steel, and then you had BVS continue straight off the bat, showing us Bruce Wayne's perspective of the Battle of Metropolis. It's probably more kind of shared than the MCU in a way, but we didn't see much of it. So it's very difficult to judge it as well. Villager, you don't know, rewind the times. I am enjoying listening to your take on every DCEU movie. You have been doing a good job on them so far. Thank you, Abraham Herrera. Hey, Villager, you are one of those tough love fans. You actually love the Snyderverse, but in a tough way. It's just that it's annoying. Thank you for that, Abraham Herrera. Everyone has a right to speak on this channel, but of course, the person who has got the big channel is me, because I get up every morning and I do 2 lives a day and I put my energy in it, even though I suffer with a kidney dysfunction that makes me really tired when I talk for so long. So if anyone has a right to speak, it's me, but so do you. So do you, but I will give you my opinion. You're never wrong from your point of view. I'm never wrong from my point of view, but nobody is ever universally right. That's the world that I live in. That's the kind of platform that I've always wanted to build. If you don't like it, I'll sit here talking on my own. I'm quite a vain bastard. I love the sound of my own voice. And that's my take on it. Snyder actually built something incredible. Rewind the times. Yes, Snyderverse has a plan. I personally just want to see some great DC movies with direction. So Snyder, as I say, had a plan. He knew where he was going. He had Man of Steel, BVS, David Ayer's Suicide Squad was going to be an amazing movie, continuing on from those previous two movies, as was Wonder Woman, but they kiboshed any connection to MOS and BVS apart from some emails between Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne and Diana, aka Wonder Woman. But Wonder Woman's a great movie, consider it. That's because Zack Snyder had his imprint all over that. Villager, I don't love the Snyderverse, but I do respect Snyder for who he is, and at least he has his own vision and doesn't do Marvel like mediocre mess. And that's the thing. That's the point I'm attempting to say, Villager, that he had a direction. His DCEU had a direction and it had an identity. Whether you like that or not, it doesn't really matter. It matters that he was doing something. Now, the problem with the Snyderverse is it wasn't made for, as you say, an MCU audience, a mainstream audience. And this is the problem the studio had. Now, the studio shouldn't have allowed Nolan, they shouldn't have even implemented Nolan to make the decisions in the first place, because he has the same sensibilities as Snyder, putting these fictional characters in the real world, right? So he was going to bring someone in who has his movie sensibilities. As a director, it's obvious, right? If I want to sit in a room and eat sweets with someone, I love fruit pastels, so I'm going to bring someone in who likes fruit pastels. That's my analogy. So the big mistake from the beginning, if you wanted the mainstream MCU type of universe to catch up with Disney, you wouldn't have brought in Nolan, because he was always going to bring in someone like Snyder, right? Probably, if he didn't bring in Snyder, he would have brought in someone else slightly controversial, like Michael Bay. It wouldn't have surprised me, right? But Snyder did something. So once you decide as a studio that you don't want Snyder's vision anymore, you have to basically say, we have to start again. They didn't do that. They were digging the hole deeper. Villager, off topic, did you see Aquaman 2? I have not seen Aquaman 2. I've seen some leaks and stuff like that, which we've discussed here, Villager. So yes, there's a lot of things I know about that movie. Abraham Herrera. The Snyderverse, even incomplete, will age better than the MCU. It already is aging better. Basically, the MCU is a successful franchise. It will be remembered for the money that it made, not its storytelling or quality of its individual movies. But people, when they're older, who love that franchise, will remember the excitement they had when they saw the first Iron Man film, or the first Avengers film, or Infinity War, or Endgame. They'll remember those moments, like people who went to an Elvis Presley gig will never forget seeing Elvis Presley. It's that type of franchise. Well, that's okay. I'm not here to diminish anything. I'm here to talk about, in the first part of today's stream, DCEU Daily. If you're watching this re-recorded, this is just an ordinary episode of today's DCEU Daily. You didn't have to come in and watch it live. I hope you're enjoying it right now. Have some popcorn while you're watching it. The point being that Snyder did have identity, did have a vision, but it wasn't for everyone. That was the problem. So as great as what Snyder did, and as much as I love it, and as much as it had a vision and an identity, it wasn't right for what they wanted to do. Now, if you want to do the polar opposite to Marvel, what Snyder was doing was great. But why such hatred? Why do people hate what Snyder was doing? Why do the mainstream audience and, die-hard comic book DC fans hate what Snyder did? Because to the purists, Superman is a pure-hearted hero. He shouldn't kill. He shouldn't be growling. He shouldn't be negative. He should be pure, smiling. A force for good. Someone that inspires people. Now, you can, of course, argue as a Snyder fan that Cavill's Superman is all of those things already. He smiles. He laughs as he's flying. His first flight is amazing. There's lots of happy moments in Man of Steel. But people perceived it as a darker take. I actually think it's a perfect modern-day Superman movie. You can't do the Richard Donner, Christopher Reeve movie in the 21st century. People's experiences are different today. It's not what they want. They may want something like that, something not exactly like it, maybe. But you can't redo the Reeves movie, even though it's my first Superman movie, my first movie. And it's the reason I love this character. And Smallville is an even more compelling reason I love this character. And I love DC. Smallville taught me more about Superman, but it taught me that Superman's weakness wasn't just kryptonite, but it was magic. But it also taught me a lot about these DC universes and iconic characters as well. Smallville taught me so much. It really made me a DC fan. Rewind the times. I've seen the front of where are we? Abraham, bloody hell, where are we? Rewind the times. I've seen the font they're using on the movie Blue Beetle. It's pretty cool looking. It has a 90s graphic look to it. Harry Pothead. I have a big mouth. Have you seen the Avatar 2 first leak pics from the trailer? Yes, I have. They didn't really do much for me. A few pictures that didn't really do anything for me. I'm looking forward to seeing the trailer. But Harry Pothead, I'm glad you're happy and clearly excited for it. So by making the decision, basically, they said, from their point of view, the studio, they said, look, this isn't working. We want to make lots of money. We want a brand, we want mainstream audiences. We want kids and parents and families watching these films. This guy's doing something else. It's not working for us. And that's really, really understandable from a business point of view. Harry Pothead, what about the leaked teaser itself? I haven't seen any leaked teasers. So anyway, that was the problem. That Snyder was doing something adult and compelling. It's like what he said to Mendelsohn when he had a go at him for saying, Justice League was like a Saturday afternoon Justice League kind of cartoon, and he's making something for adults. Snyder was triggered by Scott Mendelsohn. Snyder is very rarely triggered by anyone. In fact, Snyder makes things the way he makes them to trigger people. He likes it. He said he likes people hating and loving on his movie. Harry Pothead, it's in YouTube. I'll wait for the proper teaser to come out, Harry. Anyway, so he was going for something adult and compelling, and it's not what they wanted. And as the studio and the holders of the IP, it was their prerogative to say, this is not working for us. This is not what we want. It's too divisive. It's too negative. We never wanted this. You should have thought of that before you brought him on. So they made a key mistake. Not only by bringing him and Nolan on in the first place, because of what they wanted to do wasn't ever going to be done by Snyder. He doesn't give a shit about the mainstream audience. He's self-confessed that in the past. So they decided, no, we won't reboot the whole franchise. We're bringing Walter Hamada. So at first, he kind of took over while they were making Aquaman. Big success, surprise success, great movie. Shazam was great for audiences, kids and parents watching it together. A minute little success because they didn't spend much money on it. But then the problems began. As the original Walter Hamada content began, you could tell this is a man who knows nothing about comic books. But you can't just blame Hamada for the hamadaverse. You have to bring in Toby Emmerich, who gave Margot Robbie and her Lucky Chuck Productions company full veto on a Birds of Prey movie, deciding that a Birds of Prey movie should be a feminist movie with Harley Quinn in it. Harley Quinn isn't part of the birds in the comics. Everyone who loves the Birds of Prey in the comics was very frustrated that Harley Quinn was even going to be involved. And when the movie flopped, so-called experts had the cheek to say it's because people didn't know Harley Quinn was in the movie. Every fucker knew Harley Quinn was in the movie. In fact, Margot's Harley has been in 2 flops cinematically. People knew she was in them. Birds of Prey and James Gunn's The Suicide Squad both failed theatrically, even though people knew damn well that this so-called popular character was in it. Let's get it straight. Then you move on to Wonder Woman 84. You don't have to talk about that anymore. I've spoken about it in length on this channel. It's pretty obvious what is the most successful franchise, and it's the Snyderverse. It has a vision, it has an identity, it's made solid money, and the hamadaverse is an absolute joke. Harry Pothead, it was glorious. Abraham Herrera, Margot proudly slept with Toby to get that kind of power. I'm not gonna really respond to that, Abraham. I can't speak about things like that. Anyway, and so we know that we're not at the end of the hamadaverse. It continues. Hamada had this idea of how to fix the DCEU instead of starting again with a brand new franchise, which would have been the intelligent idea. So now you've got Snyder fans saying we want this, and there's the arguments, because this is what happens. And to make it worse, they decided to do a Batman movie in the slot of Ben Affleck's Batman that made the toxicity even worse. And we've seen the Batman stands and the Batfleck fans at it on social media. So my point's being proven. So very messy. See, he came up with this multiverse strategy. He decided that he would do a Flash movie that reboots the entire universe. Sounds exciting. Basically, he makes anything in live action ever canon. A very, very exciting idea. Of course, for that movie for that multiverse strategy and that reboot to work, that movie has to work. That movie has failed before it's released because its star is going around doing crazy things and breaking the law. Only this morning, I saw his Instagram where he was running around in a desert. Yep, the man is, look, the man's having a laugh. The man's off his nut. And their biggest idea now to save this movie that changes everything in the DCEU is to use the guy playing Batman, the 70-year-old guy playing Batman, as the marketing. Yeah, that'll work. Not. So the proof of the pudding, of course, because we're not at the end of the hamadaverse, is in the eating. And ultimately, we will find out if the hamadaverse has been a success when we see the box office for Black Adam, Shazam! Fury of the Gods, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, and the Flash movie. We will then find out what's going on, if this has been a success or if it's totally dead. Zaslav is here to make money. He's not here to be a charity for what you stand. Whatever makes money stays. Whatever doesn't make money goes. It doesn't matter what you think's trash or not. We should never be following a franchise that has something called the Snyderverse and the hamadaverse. What a joke. It's a joke. It's a mess. Once they decided to get rid of Snyder, they should have started again. We've had this conversation a million times. But who wins the war between the Snyderverse and the hamadaverse? It's obvious. Snyder does. If you're Zaslav and you look at Snyder and Hamada, you would respect Snyder over Hamada. Snyder knows DC. Hamada doesn't. I wouldn't be surprised if Hamada's never picked up a DC comic book, that he doesn't know the names of these people. And ever since Ray Fisher exposed him, he's been hiding. He's a president of DC Films, and he never talks to his customers, his audience, unlike Kevin Feige. This doesn't work. He has to go. So going forward, we need a DC Studios. What you do with that DC Studios and what kind of content you do is entirely up to you. You can do standalone movies like the Batman and Joker, although they're going to be part of an extended franchise anyway, separately and individually. You can do individual franchises. You can do that. You can do the individual movies, individual franchises like the Batman and the Jokerverse, and have a connected universe as well. You can do it all as long as you choose the correct DC Studios president. And there's so many people out there who are dying to make a success of this IP. So that's my take on Snyderverse versus Hamadaverse. Hamadaverse loses hands down. So next, I want to give you my individual journey through the DCEU franchise from film to film. So we start off with Man of Steel. Very exciting. Just as Smallville was cancelled, they announced that Christopher Nolan would be writing a Superman movie. My assumption was he would co-write and direct the movie as he did with the Dark Knight trilogy. Christopher Nolan doing a Superman movie. I thought, wow, what could possibly go wrong? I later found out that he was just going to godfather this movie in this brand new franchise, and he wasn't going to direct. I was hugely disappointed. At this stage, I'd never heard of Zack Snyder, but I had watched Watchmen and 300, but I didn't know his name. So I liked those films. I didn't watch them repeatedly, but I liked those films. I was a fan of those movies. I watched them once and I moved on. Anyway, it was announced that Zack Snyder would be directing Man of Steel. The internet went off its nuts. So many people hating on him, hating Snyder, and I didn't know why. When I found out he'd done Watchmen and 300, I was even more confused. I thought, well, these are good films. Everyone likes 300. I then found out and did some investigating and digging why people hated him. It was something that I didn't understand, so I wasn't going to hate on someone that I didn't hate. So I thought, let's give him a chance. We then found out that Lawrence Fishburne, would play Perry White. I was very excited as a big fan of Larry, and I thought he would do a great job. A lot of people were triggered because he was a gentleman of colour, and that didn't bother me because what I was saying is if they went to McDonald's and just casted anyone as Perry because he was black, that would be frustrating, right? When you're kind of doing this switch. But you're actually casting someone good, and it doesn't really matter about the colour of his skin. Then we had the whole Jenny Olsen rumours. Jenny Olsen was supposed to replace Jimmy Olsen. I was not happy about this because I'm a big Jimmy Olsen fan. I believe that Jimmy Olsen is the fans' way, the viewer's way into the story. You might not be able to identify with Superman, but a teenage human boy who becomes Superman's best pal is literally like the companion in Doctor Who. It's your way into the story. So when we saw Jenny in the movie, she wasn't called Jenny Olsen, but ultimately she is Jenny Olsen. Now, the actress is great. The character was great. I liked her. She didn't do much in the film, apart from being stuck and needing Perry's help. But she's okay. I didn't hate her, but there was no need to swap her instead of, having her instead of Jimmy Olsen. We know Snyder hates Olsen and thinks he's an irrelevant character. I'm sorry, Zack, as much as I love you and respect you, I can't agree about that. Anyway, the marketing for Man of Steel was tremendous. Although I think they showed a bit too much of the movie, but what we saw was amazing. We did literally see the whole movie in the marketing. I had never seen such a marketing drive in my life. Unfortunately, it took a long time for Man of Steel to go get to 200 million at the US box office. So the media were making a big deal out of it. So that was a negative experience for me. Then we had MCU fans criticizing the destruction and a lot of the action in Man of Steel. But I love it. And I still do. I loved it then and I still love it today. My first experience of watching Man of Steel was, I can't fucking believe what I'm seeing here. This is amazing. He's fighting. He's punching. He's using his powers. He looks strong. He's a hero. This is amazing. I love the costume. I love the way they brought Amy Adams, Lois Lane into the adventure. It made sense. It was great. I loved it. And in Michael Shannon Zod, they had one of the best supervillains of all time because he was relatable as a person, as a character, and what he was trying to do. So Man of Steel was a great start. Then we go to Batman versus Superman. And so with Batman versus Superman, the first thing I heard about it is when they did San Diego Comic-Con, and you had the guy who played Swanwick kind of read the quote from The Dark Knight Returns. Everyone was excited. We were getting a Batman versus Superman movie. I was nitpicking at first. I wanted Superman to be the head name because I'm a Superman fan. I wanted Superman versus Batman, right? But anyway, they did that. It was cool. I got used to it after a while. So, of course, I was very excited that Ben Affleck and Henry Cavill's characters would cross over and that this would be the dawn of the Justice League. So I was excited because this franchise was taking shape already. We were crossing over. We were introducing characters. We were going to have Wonder Woman, the first live-action movie Wonder Woman. How exciting was this? We found out that Gal was cast. Some idiots were saying that she needed bigger breasts and things like that. Ridiculous statements. Gal is perfect and always will be. But the film surprised me when I went to see it in the theatre for the very first time. It surprised me for all the right reasons. It did feel like this kind of indie kind of movie. It didn't feel like a blockbuster. It didn't feel very mainstream, but it did feel like The Dark Knight. It felt compelling. It felt amazing. And seeing Superman sacrifice himself for everyone. You know, picking that kryptonite up and not letting Wonder Woman do it. Being the hero, that it's him that makes the sacrifice. That film was perfect for me. It was compelling, and that was just a 2.5-hour theatrical version. None of us had seen the Ultimate Edition yet. I was very pleased with BVS. The marketing was the same as MOS. They showed us far too much, nearly the entirety of the movie. But I liked it. I liked the marketing. I liked what I was seeing. I was very excited. Coming out the cinema, I never thought I would ever see the toxicity and hatred and civil war for a movie, ever. Don't forget, Mel Gibson made The Passion of the Christ, a film that states that, you know, the Hebrews were to blame for Jesus' crucifixion. You can't get more controversial than that. And a Hollywood movie. The irony of that isn't lost on me. Where was the controversy? People moaned, but there weren't the type of arguments on Twitter that we saw for BVS. Oliver Stone solved a president's assassination in a movie. Warner Brothers were very brave to let Stone do it. There wasn't the controversy. I mean, there wasn't social media, I think, back then anyway. But anyway, so those are two movies that should have split audiences and fans, and they really didn't. But a film about Batman and Superman split audiences more than a film that has a hot take about the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Wow, that's amazing. Think about it. Why were people triggered? Well, Batman was holding a gun. He was killing people. But what really pissed people off was the kind of way Superman was projected in this film. Looking like he wanted to top himself, looking very unhappy. Most people hated him. There wasn't a lot of positive vibes for Superman in this movie. Some people even blaming Henry Cavill's performance, which, of course, this is the problem that Henry has and why he and WB Pictures are at war. It wasn't his fault. He just did as he was told. He was being a good soldier. I don't think Man of Steel is a particular mistake. I do feel, in terms of Superman, as much as I do like BVS, what they did to Superman in BVS probably was a mistake. It was a gamble that simply didn't pay off. I remember doing a video on my other YouTube channel when I had it. I don't know what it is, what it was called, where it is now. It did well. It trended. It got me spoken about for a very long time. That was a long time ago. People forgot about me. I probably haven't had a video on this channel kind of have so many views because we were all getting upset about this movie. Whether we were defending it or attacking it, you took a side. And it was a very interesting time. And it was really before the Snyderverse fandom really got a voice. So it was an interesting time. I couldn't believe how people hated it. Now I can kind of understand that diehard comic book fans and other people who really like their Superman and Batman pure in a certain way would be upset. But the level of hatred for this movie and the mocking of the Martha moment and the way people hated it. I mean, I was shocked. I was shocked, as I say, a Jesus Christ movie with a hot take, JFK, the story that won't go away, two very controversial movies. But no, Batman versus Superman is a controversial movie. No, it's not. Yes, Batman and Superman weren't portrayed the way a lot of people wanted them to. They were both deconstructed, but the idea was to reconstruct them. In fact, Batman and Superman are reconstructed by the end of BVS. Superman being Superman, making the ultimate sacrifice, and Batman learning that Superman was a hero and being inspired by his death to bring together the Justice League. It's a reconstruction, it's a deconstruction to reconstruct. That was the whole idea. That's why you do deconstructive storytelling. You never leave it deconstructed. BVS was Snyder's Empire Strikes Back. It was his Wrath of Khan. It was probably more his Wrath of Khan than the Empire Strikes Back. It's a bit like what Spock does in the Wrath of Khan and sacrifices himself. And it was a compelling, amazing movie with lots and lots of commentary, right? I like BVS, but I can understand why mainstream audiences didn't like it. So then we began getting trailers of David Ayer's, or what we thought was David Ayer's Suicide Squad. The mainstream audience liked what they saw at San Diego Comic-Con. They said, this one looks actually really, really good. We didn't know what was going on. The studio had really got scared after the reaction of BVS. It got nowhere near the box office they wanted it to. So you had negativity on social media, and they didn't make the money they wanted to, because BVS cost about 500 million to make, along with the marketing and everything else. It didn't make the money that they wanted it to. You can kind of deny that, but that's the facts. So they decided that it was time to move away from this director, Zack Snyder. At first, because he was already working on Justice League, so the cat was already out the bag. The crayons were out of the wallet. And what happened was they tried to get him to tone his vision down. Snyder was never going to bend to them. So this is where we were. But Suicide Squad was released, and it was the first time they messed with somebody's movie in the DCEU. Well, they did mess with BVS. They cut half an hour from it. But because it failed, they needed some hype. So that's why they did the Ultimate Edition very quickly. And Snyder, as usual, exposed them publicly, saying that they decided to cut out half an hour of the movie. So this is the difference between Snyder and some other directors. We'll talk about that when we talk about Sam Raimi at the end of today's DCE Daily. So they'd already started messing with Suicide Squad. They forced David Ayer to rewrite. He may not have even rewrote it. I think maybe Jeff Johns rewrote the movie. And he had to go back and do reshoots. And basically, the original vision of the film wasn't pop music, rock music, Queen and all of that. It was going to be proper composed, conducted, orchestrated music. It has a beautiful score, apparently. So they went and did something else. It made around $800 million. It was a success. But audiences, again, mainstream audiences and critics hated the hell out of it. Again, I found this film okay. I didn't hate it. There was some great Batman moments in it. There was some great beats for a death shot. I think Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn is at her best. She's never been done as well as she was in that movie. That feels more like Harley Quinn than the shitty feminist versions they did both in James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, because James bent the knee, because his politics are the same as hers. He hates men. He hates his own gender, right? And of course, Birds of Prey, we've already discussed. So that was The Suicide Squad. It's kind of like Venom. Critics hate Venom. A lot of people hate Venom, even the second one. But those films make money. So that's your protection when your film makes money. So anyway, we got to our fourth DCEU movie, Wonder Woman. So Wonder Woman was a really exciting build-up for me, because I liked how they did her in BVS, and I was very excited to see what they were going to do with her. We started getting a lot of trailers, and it looked amazing. Now, the mainstream audience were excited. The palettes were cleaner, brighter. It looked like this was going to be an amazing movie. And this is one of the most popular movies in the DCEU. It hobbled to 800 million like Suicide Squad, but the difference between this movie and Suicide Squad, everybody loved this movie. It was a celebration. In fact, Wonder Woman 2017, as I've told you many times, is one of my best comic book movies of all time, if not my best. It gave me the vibe it did as a 10-year-old kid watching Superman the movie. I was excited. The music made me fall in love. Seeing Lily Aspel as a young Diana just running around in the opening of the movie opened my heart. This is young Diana, and Lily's got great quality, and you just fall in love with her Diana straight away. And from that moment on, and listening to Rupert Gregson's Williams' music, the whole film is a poem. It's a poem. It's a sonnet. And in fact, Rupert's music reminds me of John Williams' Superman music. It's that kind of vibe. It's the kind of vibe you felt that WB wanted to bring in. Wonder Woman 2017 is the perfect movie, including the third act. Like it or not, that's my truth. You don't like it, tough. It's a perfect movie, and it's a love story. It's everything. It's not about the villains. The villains play a secondary role. But I think the Nazi guy and Dr. Poison were pretty awesome, but they weren't supposed to be moustache-twirling villains that were supposed to be central. This wasn't supposed to be Ledger's Joker. This wasn't supposed to be Shannon's Zod. They weren't supposed to be defined villains. That's why they work. People are calling them bad villains. They're not. They're superior to most MCU villains, by the way. They did what they were supposed to do. That film works. It was beautiful, and I was hopeful the DCEU could become a mainstream popular thing now that I saw Wonder Woman. Little did I know that Justice League was round the corner. So the build up to Justice League was very, very exciting. We even got a video, a melody of Zack finishing production in London. Do you remember the whole music there? And you saw them all, dancing, and you saw Jason take Gal's sword, and everyone was having a laugh. We didn't know what was about to happen. The trailers again showed us some wonderful moments, and I was excited. It looked exciting. It looked action-packed. This looked amazing. Do you remember that whole sequence between Batman and Barry Allen with the Batarang? It was very exciting. Rewind the times. Wonder Woman is a very good movie. I agree. It's my favorite CBM, my friend. It's a solid. It opens up my heart. It makes me cry. I fucking love it. I want to feel things. There's some comic book movies, like the MCU doesn't make me feel things, but that film makes me feel things. There's very few actually DC movies that make me feel things as well. There's a few out there. Smallville makes me feel a lot more things than a lot of other live action stuff out there. But anyway, and so the Wonder Woman movie was perfect. We go on to Justice League. The trailers are great. Then we hear the big, shocking breaking news. Autumn Snyder had tragically taken her own life. Zack Snyder had said he had to step away from the movie. He tried, but he couldn't. He needed to be there for his family. We all understood that. Only a nutter, diehard geek would say anything else, right? I'm a diehard geek, but I've got a heart and a soul. He then said, or the studio said, Toby Emmerich said, that his good friend Joss Whedon from Avengers Assemble, the first Avengers movie fame, would come in. This is the guy who successfully made Buffy an Angel. This is the guy who made the first Avengers Ensemble movie. And we loved that movie. It was an amazing movie. We thought, wow. But even then, I knew one thing, that Snyder was being pushed out, and they were trying to bring the MCU success by bringing in Whedon. Now, this was my opinion at the time. As much as I love Zack and what he did with MOS and BVS and lots of the stuff in Wonder Woman as well, I thought to myself, maybe this is for the best, because he is triggering people. It's not working. It's not making the money they need. Joss Whedon did Buffy and Angel. Joss Whedon did 2 really good Avengers movies. Maybe this is a good thing. Little did I know that the plan was for him to take somebody else's movie, strip it down, and try and colour it in like a colouring book, right? That's what they attempted to do. I don't blame Joss Whedon for this one little bit. He was brought in to do a hard gig. He just did it so he would get Batgirl. Ultimately, he wouldn't get Batgirl, and he would have his career destroyed because he couldn't handle the pressure and the short time frame to put this reworked movie together. And because of the time frame being short, when we saw the movie, it was terrible. We could see it was terrible. Again, not Whedon's fault. It was Kevin Sugihara, the head of Warner Brothers Pictures at the time. They made a huge mistake. If you want to move on from Snyder, again, it's not a good idea to carry on his franchise. But if you're going to do it, what you'd say to Jeff Johns and Joss Whedon, you say, right, guys, we're going to tell the public that Zack is gone, that we had creative differences, which is what they should have done, and you are going to start from scratch with this Justice League movie. We're starting again with a brand new franchise, and your Justice League movie will be the first entry into this franchise. That's what they should have done. No, they created a bomb they could never kind of fix the wreckage for. And I went to see that movie, and I was devastated. This isn't what I was thinking or hoping for. This wasn't a continuation of what Snyder had done. This wasn't something that I could enjoy. I was heartbroken. I remember being in the cab and lying to the cab driver that I enjoyed it. I just didn't have the energy to explain why I didn't like this movie. But I felt in my heart something had gone wrong. So it felt like I couldn't support the DCEU anymore. It felt like it would be wrong. They've made such an embarrassing movie. This is embarrassing for the studio I stand as well as for the franchise I stand. I can't support this franchise anymore. You know me, I didn't mean it. I got over it within time. Rewind the times. The Flash on the CW for me makes me feel things. Love that show, and Grant Gustin's Barry Allen. Cool. So, as the film subsided, some interesting things were going on. Rumours of another cut. This is my experience of the DCEU from film to film, of course. So, I didn't pay it any mind, but there was a guy putting together his own version of Zack Snyder's Justice League. I think it was a black suit man or something. Do you remember all of that? Anyway, I thought that was the Snyder cut. So I came on my channel, I remember saying I'd seen it. I hadn't seen it, obviously, but I thought that I did. Anyway, so we started hearing a lot of rumours and lots of information about the movie. Then someone leaked the Iris and Barry moment when Barry puts his finger through the pane of glass. And all of a sudden, that's when it started. That's what started the Release the Snyder Cut campaign. Who could have leaked that? I think one Zack Snyder may have been behind that. Nobody else could have been able to leak that. So don't tell me any different. So that started it off. Anyway, we started getting to the build-up of Aquaman. We all said it. Experts in the industry, everyone said it. If this film fails, it is the end of the DCEU. How many times have we said that? The DCEU is like the lame duck that just keeps on limping on and on. But what happened with Aquaman is we got some really good trailers, and James Wan became very, very vocal. Grace Randolph saying that the air bubbles would still be in the movie. James Wan replied to Grace Randolph saying, "There's no air bubbles in my movie." So it began. What did this mean? This meant that they were restructuring what Zack Snyder had done with his Atlantis. They were moving on from Snyder for good. That was the idea. Anyway, it was also announced that Walter Hamada would be the president of DC Films. Jeff Johns admitting that being the leader of a DC extended universe wasn't for him. He admitted his mistakes. Yes, I know some of you can't admit that. He admitted he was wrong for it, and he said he was a storyteller and he would go back to writing. And he hoped that Walter Hamada would get a Twitter account so fans could kind of exchange views with him. To this day, Walter Hamada still hasn't got a Twitter account. Probably he's right not to have one at this moment. He's only going to get hate. So there's no point. How sad. I'm sure he's a good guy. You know, just because we don't like the jobs people do, it doesn't mean they're bad people. Always remember that. So very, very sad that hasn't really worked out. So anyway, I got a very, very special invitation to see the Aquaman test screening, or one of the Aquaman test screenings. And I was very excited for this because I loved James Wan. At the time, it was rumored he wanted to make a Knight Rider movie as well. And so I went to see this test screening, and it was a complete movie. It wasn't in bits, because James Wan doesn't like to see his work. He doesn't want his work out there incomplete. That's why he said the trailer wasn't coming out until it was perfect. He's a perfectionist. Anyway, I sat there and saw one of the best comic book movies of all time. Fact. I don't care what people think. The VFX. I'd never seen VFX like this since Man of Steel and Avatar and BVS. It was so good. Up there with what Lucas did in '77 with Star Wars. Amazing. Atlantis looked like how I thought it would look like in my imagination. But it wasn't just the visual thing. He did something that Cameron didn't do in Avatar. He created characters and storylines that actually worked emotionally. Like her or not, Amber Heard is a great mirror. And it's really, really sad that she's been reduced to 10 minutes. But the reason I want her gone is not because I hate Amber, because I think she's bad for DC. That's the only reason. I don't really care about her and Johnny Depp. I'm not invested in that thing. They're just a couple of Hollywood nut jobs, and it's their personal lives. I don't care. And we'll see what happens with that next week. It's huge, by the way, because she stands up. It's her side's time to tell their story. So Johnny Depp hasn't won yet. He's already lost one case in London. Don't forget about that. But anyway, Amber Heard is a great mirror. Her and Jason just about have enough chemistry to make you feel really emotional about their love story. It's not as good as Diana's and Steve Trevor's love story, but it still works. The screen chemistry between Orm, Patrick Wilson, who is an amazing villain, as I reacted on here on my very successful video I'd seen Aquaman at the time. I put him up there with Shannon Zod, and his chemistry with Jason Momoa was brilliant when they first come face to face with each other. You feel the emotion. It's so powerful. So James Wan created a wonderful Aquaman movie, and this is why it made $1 billion. So everyone was surprised, because you would have thought Aquaman would have been punished for Justice League, and because people were fighting to release the Snyder Cut. But no, people went to see that movie. People loved that movie. It had rewatchability. It was an amazing comic book movie. Rewind the times. When I left the theatre after seeing Aquaman, I was feeling such a high, feeling love with that movie. Still love it. Yes, it's an amazing movie. So anyway, the next DC Extended Universe movie was going to be Shazam. Could Shazam make the $1 billion plus that Aquaman did? It was going to be difficult because a lot of people remember Shazam as Captain Marvel. It's confusing. I won't go into it. Not many people don't know who the character Shazam is. Zachary Levi was very popular, of course, in Chuck, but he wasn't that well known either. You know, the kids that were coming in, like Asher Angel and all those, weren't that famous either. But the film was very interesting. I saw the trailers and I thought, okay, this will be good. I wasn't as excited from these trailers as I was for Aquaman, MOS, BVS, Wonder Woman, but it still looked good. Ultimately, this film would be a family affair, something that I'd want to watch with my nephews and nieces, or you'd want to watch with your kids and your partners. It was a family viewing thing, really for the first time since really, I mean, Aquaman was kind of family friendly, not so much, but it was a little bit, at least it was a bright color palette. And Wonder Woman was more accessible to families, but that was still a bit brutal in places. But this was a proper family movie. So Shazam would come out and do really well. When I say really well, just under 400 million. It only cost about 90 to 80 million to make with marketing. So it didn't cost Walter Hamada much to get this film made. So it was a success. It made 2 or 3 times more than its budget. You can't call that movie a flop. No matter how you paint it, it's a good, solid, successful movie. And I really, really enjoyed it. One of the things I enjoyed for the first time in a long time since the third movie, Suicide Squad, we actually had lots of Easter eggs for Snyder's DCEU. This got people excited that maybe Snyder wasn't done with the DC Extended Universe. They used the Batarang within the story. We had a Batman and Superman toys when Shazam or Billy's trying to run away from the villain of the film, whose name always escapes me. But him, you know who I mean anyway. And so they had a good villain in the movie. So Levi was an amazing Shazam. Asher Angel was an amazing Billy. You had a wonderful young man who played Freddy. And, you know, he was great as well. So the cast, the kids were great. The adults were great. It was a really entertaining movie. It seemed like Walter Hamada was turning things around in a mainstream direction, and it was working. Then would come a new movie called Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of one Harley Quinn. I had really enjoyed Margot Robbie's turn as Harley in the first Suicide Squad movie. I felt she'd been done right, and I was excited. A lot of people were complaining they didn't want Harley in the movie because it was going to step over the Birds of Prey. Ultimately, people were right. I defended the decision to have Harley, and I was wrong. It does happen a couple of times a year. So, I saw this film. It was utterly disappointing. Before I saw this film, I remember the premiere, and I remember Ewan McGregor saying this was about toxic masculinity, and then I knew we were in trouble. You see, Margot Robbie isn't like the other SJWs. She doesn't come out blatantly and talk her extremist talk. She lets other people do it. In terms of the director and people like Ewan McGregor, but she never says it publicly, so it never affects her popularity. She is a coward. Birds of Prey wasn't the worst DC comic book movie I'd ever seen. In fact, in places, I really enjoyed it. It was fun. It had lots of laughs in it. The choreography wasn't as bad as people said. It wasn't the best choreography ever. The action wasn't great, but the relationship between her and the young woman was good. I actually liked the young woman who she was acting with. So I didn't think it was the most terrible movie, but the toxic commentary against my gender was too much for me to take. Now, Then we were going to Wonder Woman 84. I was very excited for Wonder Woman 84. As far as I was concerned, I wasn't really concerned about Patty. I loved Patty at that time. She talked very well. Her and Gal were very positive during the marketing for the first Wonder Woman. They were sharing pictures on Twitter and Instagram about young boys and young women dressing up as Wonder Woman. They were saying Wonder Woman is for everyone. They weren't going down the woke angle. I liked them, and I liked Patty, and I held her responsible for the success of the first movie at that time. Of course, that attitude has changed now. But anyway, so I was very excited for Wonder Woman 84. It was supposed to be released in 2019. All of a sudden, one day, I turned on my YouTube, and Grace Randolph did an expose on this movie. Grace Randolph claimed that via Wonder Woman 84, they would incite a Flashpoint storyline that would change the DCEU forever. Of course, people claim that she was lying, but isn't it suspicious that they actually did are doing the Flashpoint storyline and rebooting the universe via the Flash movie? So obviously, Randolph was onto something. Very quickly after Randolph's video, they delayed the movie and started doing reshoots. The movie would be released in 2020, something they would regret for the rest of their businessy lives. Rewind the times. Dr. Sivana, very good villain. Yes, I love Sivana. Mark Strong is a fellow Brit. Mark's great. Alex, DC would have been in a way better position had WB stuck with Snyder. We would have had 3 Justice League movies, an amazing Superman journey, and who knows what else. Well, Alex, you probably know I'm a fan of Zack's vision, but I understand why it's damaging for a mainstream universe to try and go down that direction. I think it would have been a lot more successful. I still think there would have been infighting and it still would have been divisive. I would hope once they saw Superman leading humanity and these metahumans leading this army and saying everyone's the Justice League and, leading out these people to fight Darkseid, that people would have come to the table and then Zack could have done more. So you're right, it would have been a lot more successful because the hamadaverse isn't successful. The whole franchise is inconsistent. So Wonder Woman 84 was delayed to 2020. They had done some reshoots. Those reshoots quickly finished because I assume they cut out a lot of sequences that I'd actually seen in an earlier test screening that I'm still signed up not to talk about. They cut out the multiversal reboot angle of that movie and decided to do it in a Flash movie because it felt to them as a better fit. They were right. So anyway, Wonder Woman 84 was originally supposed to be released, I think, in summer of 2020. The COVID pandemic hit us. It kept on getting delayed. Warner Media weren't going to wait forever, and they decided to use Wonder Woman 84 as an experiment with day and date. The experiment worked for HBO Max and subscribers. It didn't do well in cinemas because, to be fair, it was released in the peak of the pandemic back then. It was problematic, but people went to see it. At first, critics said it was a very, very good movie. But slowly, more and more critics would be very concerned about this movie. How Wonder Woman was having sex with a man who was supposed to be Steve Trevor, but in fact really was another man who she was having intercourse with, but who she never asked permission. It was a big problem, considering these SJW nutjobs think that a Prince Charming is a rapist for kissing Snow White without her permission. Let's not forget, Snow White is dead. She's asleep. She can't wake up. He's trying to save her life. Anyway, you can't reason with these nutjobs. So, Wonder Woman 84 wasn't a particularly great movie. You can watch it in the afternoon and get a semblance of kind of enjoyment from it, but it's not the greatest of CBMs. There's loads of woke and SJW commentary in it. We've got the old men looking at the aerobic dancers bending over in the mall. There's lots of issues with this movie. And in a lot of places, it doesn't make sense. Where did it succeed? I think Pedro Pascal played a good villain, but he isn't the character from the comics. And that's the problem. That was the problem for me. And basically, he's Donald Trump. That's another issue. But Pedro did a good job because Pedro is a good actor. Cheetah is embarrassing. Nothing like the Cheetah from the comics. She's such an exciting villain. Such an exciting, multi-layered character in the comics. They didn't do her justice. The casting was wrong. Everything was wrong. The film ended up being a mess. The only thing you can say is a success is Hans Zimmer's score. They even did the BVS theme at the end of the movie using a little slide piano. And it was great. It was emotional. That little bit when she's talking to Pedro Pascal's Maxwell Lord was emotional. It makes me cry. She tried to steer away from an action set piece, but the truth is she steered away from the action set piece, not because she was trying to put right what she felt was wrong about the third act, but Patty can't do action. She can't do action. Zack directed all the action in Wonder Woman 2017. It was clear to me at this point that Patty Jenkins co-wrote and directed not a very good movie. And could the person who claimed to be responsible for Wonder Woman 84 truly be responsible for Wonder Woman 2017? I said no. A fraud had been perpetuated. She lied to everyone during the marketing that she didn't see Justice League as canon and the Snyderverse, the Snyder Cut as canon, just to get us on side. A lot of things started to come out, and it started to seem very, very obvious at this time that Zack Snyder and Patty Jenkins weren't as good of friends as we thought they were. In fact, Patty Jenkins was Jeff Johns' choice and Sujihara's choice to direct Wonder Woman 2017, or at least put her name on the lid, on the can, on the movie. Zack Snyder wanted somebody else to direct that movie, and they got rid of her. She was never Zack's choice, and her and Zack had problems all the way through the first movie. More evidence of this is how she cleared out all his production team, like his amazing superior VFX team and stunt team. That's how much and how close Zack Snyder and Patty Jenkins were. Zack decided, and this is typical of Zack Snyder, passive-aggressive while smiling and pretending he's, cool. He showed us a picture of Wonder Woman and a bunch of Indians holding these heads. His idea for Wonder Woman 2017 was very different to Jenkins. In fact, Jenkins thought this was disgusting, and this is why she made Wonder Woman 84 as a toxic statement against what Snyder wanted to do. She made that toxic statement. So Wonder Woman 84 was a huge disappointment. But then we heard some controversy. James Gunn had been sacked by Disney for some historic tweets joking about children being abused by people. Why anyone would make jokes like this, I don't know. The fandom menace would later expose him for being at some interesting themed parties. I won't go into it. I don't want to lose my channel. I don't know what was going on. Anyway, Walter Hamada and Toby Emmerich especially decided it would be a good idea to bring James Gunn into the DC Extended Universe. So they did. They gave him a choice in what to do, even suggesting Superman. But he's always been a Suicide Squad fan, so he wanted to make a Suicide Squad movie. James Gunn would bring back Margot Robbie and some of David Ayer's cast, killing them all off, apart from the woman, of course, because women have got to be seen, and we can't be killing them off, and they can't be villains. Anyway, James Gunn's The Suicide Squad is a very funny, exciting, action-packed movie. The movie works. It's not the best CBM I've ever seen, but it's good. Some people claiming at the time, even my subscribers, it was the best DCEU movie ever. I couldn't agree with that. But anyway, the movie was good, but theatrically it came out at the same time as the COVID pandemic was still a thing, but not so bad. But people didn't support it. It was on day and date, but it did do record numbers on HBO Max. And then they allowed him to do a Peacemaker spin-off show. I'm about to watch episode 3. I finally got access to it. So far, so good. So bringing in James Gunn was a good idea, but financially, not so much. Clearly, people who didn't appreciate his humor with the joke about the children boycotted the film. That's clear to me. But it was a success on HBO Max. Fair enough. So that was The Suicide Squad. That's the DCEU. That's my experience of these movies from film to film. It's been an interesting experience. We started off with excitement and hope and then heartbreak. And that's without even talking about my experience of going through fighting for the Snyder Cut, the release of the Snyder Cut on this very channel. Very interesting. Making new friends, meeting new characters, seeing people become successful on YouTube via this campaign. It was an amazing time. It was an interesting time. And then I remember the day when it was announced on a Man of Steel watch party with Zack Snyder and Henry Cavill that they would release the Snyder Cut. I came on here and I snapped the Justice League Blu-ray. It was a very proud day for me, and it made a lot of people smile, and I'm glad I did it. It was so exciting. The build-up to the Snyder Cut was very exciting, but it became very toxic as Ray Fisher delivered a bomb that all the support he showed for Joss Whedon was because the studio made him, and he had gone through some hard times along with some other actors and people on the production. He claimed major bullying on the set of Justice League, and he demanded an investigation. So while we were looking forward to Zack's vision of his Justice League movie, they were outing this studio. And some weird things were going on at the time. And it was very hard to look forward to the Snyder Cut with all this different shit I had to report on as well. But despite all the toxicity, Zack Snyder's Justice League Snyder Cut was a triumph. It's one of the best comic book movies ever made. Good luck making a better Justice League than that one, WB. It was amazing. I've seen the numbers for HBO Max, record-breaking numbers. It's still the most successful viewed streaming event in the history of streaming. No one's going to say that to you. Yes, sorry, Grace Randolph. It wasn't a failure. It worked because I've seen the number because of my I've seen the numbers because of my contacts. It was a success. So that's the DCEU and my experience from film to film. An interesting experience. An experience I'll probably never have again in films. It's when you visually see a studio doing the wrong thing again and again and again and not learning and seeing the power of us, the consumer, fight for a release of a film they said didn't exist. And this is how corrupt these people are. But Zack Snyder fought a good game. Along with the fans who supported him, we will never see the likes of this again. So now let's move on to Arrowverse. In the past few years, we've seen many Arrowverse TV shows getting cancelled. Some very good ones, like Black Lightning. I think that's probably the only good one that didn't deserve cancelling, but clearly the ratings weren't enough. So let's look at the history of the CW. Hashling me, Sam Raimi wants to make Spider-Man 4 with Toby. I think he'll make a Superman film before he touches that. I will talk about Sam Raimi in other news away from the DCEU at the end of this video. So, let's go back to the history of the CW network. Originally, the CW network didn't exist. It was called the WB. This was a channel owned by WB Television. It had iconic hits like Buffy. Buffy was huge for the WB network. We had Justice League Unlimited on it. It was a great channel. Shows like Supernatural that went on for 14 seasons and, of course, crossed over to the CW in the end. But the biggest hit ever on the original WB was Smallville. WB and the creators of Smallville, Alfred Goff and Miles Miller, had a great relationship. They were allowed creative leeway. So that relationship was great. Slowly but surely, Warner Brothers Television and CBS would merge this channel together. They would change it to the CW, and a woman called Dawn Ostoff would be running this studio. It wouldn't be for children anymore. It wouldn't just be for teenagers. They would want to attract teenage girls. So they came out with shows like Vampire Diaries, which was a huge success, very popular with young teenage girls, the people with the most disposable income. That show worked, and right then, vampires were more niche than superheroes. Smallville was near the end when the CW took over. It still had 3 seasons to go, but the CW at its beginning was a rated-staffed. It was a rating-staffed network. They needed Smallville. That's why it kept on getting renewed. It was so popular. Ultimately, in its final 2 seasons, it was moved to the death slot of Friday nights. But to the CW's surprise, and it's not what they wanted, it was doing well on Friday nights. No one could destroy Smallville. But ultimately, Christopher Nolan, who was working on Man of Steel, felt it wasn't a good idea to have this really popular version of Superman on the telly while they were developing a new Superman universe. I don't agree, and I think Smallville should have spun off into Metropolis with a brand new actor as Superman because Tom didn't want to wear the suit. So you don't want to wear the suit, you recast. Anyway, and I always said it would have been my idea, instead of having Arrowverse, to spin off Smallville into these different versions of these DC characters, rather than doing it with Arrowverse, but they didn't. So I was very disappointed at first when, for example, they were casting a brand new Green Arrow in Stephen Amell. Of course, once I saw that pilot, I was fucking in love. It was amazing. So we went from Smallville, that ended after 10 seasons, to Arrow, and then The Flash, and then Legends of Tomorrow. Those first 3 shows at first were unproblematic and very entertaining. But we saw what they were doing from series to series. It became very extreme left, very toxic, very unentertaining. In the end, I had to walk away. But Berlanti did one amazing thing that the DCEU has never done. It created a popular DC TV shared franchise. We then went to a Supergirl show, and we then had other spin-offs as well. We've even got a Stargirl show. We've got Superman and Lois. We had so many Arrowverse shows, nobody knew where it would end. We had really, really, exciting, amazing crossovers, right? This is how the DC TV had their very own MCU on the CW. And that's how the CW got the Netflix $1 billion deal. By getting this $1 billion deal, every show on Netflix could stream internationally. It was a very valuable deal, and it meant even if nobody watched the CW shows, they just pocketed $1 billion. So why do we care? Let's keep on making this shit, right? But slowly but surely, the shows will begin to be cancelled. Late last year, it was announced that the $1 billion Netflix deal wouldn't be a thing anymore. Shows started to become cancelled. The Arrowverse becomes shrunk and uninteresting, and also hurt by the pandemic. Viewers would shrink. Batwoman didn't work. They've just cancelled that, of course, as they have Legends of Tomorrow after 7 seasons. 7 seasons, too late, if you ask me. I was having my breakfast this morning and I realised what all this reminds me of. It reminds me of when the Marvel Netflix franchise started cancelling each show. And I was saying to people, it's not Netflix. Disney don't want to do the deal anymore. They want all those shows on their streaming platform. Something that's now sending Netflix to bankruptcy. Because Netflix success was through other people's content, from other Hollywood studios' content. And because the Hollywood studios and the networks didn't have streaming platforms at the time, Netflix were making a lot of money. As the other entities started having their own streaming platforms and Netflix started losing stuff, that's why I believe Netflix is around 6 months away from bankruptcy. Let's see if I'm right. Because the last people you're going to choose out of Disney Plus and HBO Max and Paramount Plus is Netflix. They don't have enough huge IPs of their own. They tried to become the biggest Hollywood studio and they failed. Anyway, to Arrowverse. Ultimately, Arrowverse would pay for its own propaganda in its shows. The crossovers were still being watched, but the actual series, people didn't have much interest anymore. At this moment in time, we have Stargirl, Superman and Lois, and I think we've got another show, and The Flash, and I think that's the shows. And they're going to do Gotham Knights if they green light the series after the pilot. I suspect that they will. This is the end of the CW Arrowverse. Arrowverse is dead. By the time they sell the CW network, there will be no Arrowverse. By the time somebody else owns the CW, all the old historic episodes of Arrowverse will all be exclusively on HBO Max, and no one else will be able to watch them unless they're watching them on HBO Max. Superman and Lois will continue. It's hugely popular, and I think it will go exclusively to HBO Max as well. The Flash will be cancelled. I don't know about Stargirl, what the future for Stargirl. I think she will do very well on HBO Max exclusively, away from the CW as well. And there you have it, the end of the Arrowverse. But the positive things I will say, Berlanti did create a shared universe. It did work. It's ironic for me that Berlanti doesn't like Superman because he's a man and he resisted doing Superman for years. and it's now Superman that's saving his butt, that's saving his bacon. That's ironic. And that, my friends, is the story of the Arrowverse. And finally today, we go to other news away from the DCEU. So this is what Sam Raimi has... Right, where are we? Oh, I see. You've decided to go away from what I was... Hey, come on, man. This is what being live is all about, right? Anyway, here we are. Where are we? Right, let's start again. Technology, don't you love it? Anyway, Sam Raimi says Spider-Man 3 was a very painful experience. I wanted to make a Spider-Man movie to redeem myself for that. The aborted Spider-Man 4, that was really what that was about. I wanted to go out on a high note. I didn't want to just make another one that pretty much worked. I had a really high standard in my mind, and I didn't think I could get that script to the level that I was hoping for by that start date. So really, they were rushing him to start the movie, and he wasn't ready, and that's why he left the franchise. One thing I'll say about Sam Raimi, he's very honest. You get Zack Snyder constantly blaming the studio. And they are partially to blame, but also Zack stood firm on what he wanted to make, no matter what other DC fans wanted. That was a problem. He is a deconstructor, that's the problem. So his side of it, he never admitted. But Sam Raimi there saying, I'm not proud of Spider-Man 3, I'm disappointed in Spider-Man 3, I wanted to make Spider-Man 4 to make up for Spider-Man 3, but they were rushing me, and I couldn't make it. And that's a shame. He has said he'd be willing to make Spider-Man 4, but is the studio? If the studio has done its research, how well Spider-Man 4 would do, they would know the only reason Spider-Man No Way Home made $2 billion is because of Tobey Maguire, and because he was the first live-action movie Spider-Man, he's still the best Spider-Man. People will come, Sony, but let Sam do his thing. Don't interfere, and you can make a hell of a lot of money. This has been the DCEU Daily with me, Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you never miss this beautiful perfection. And I'll see you tonight for Movies TV Mad Live, where we can talk live and exchange views. Until then, until I see you tonight, we see each other again. Goodbye. Au revoir. Auf Wiedersehen. See you tonight.